Hi, long range hunting. Today we're going to be talking about Texas heart shots. Now, this is not something I recommend. This has come up in recent weeks, talking with some people that were trying to advocate for this shot. I do not recommend that. Now, as always, I'm going to give you a complete breakdown as to why. Now, first things first, understanding ballistics. Now, anybody who's watched the videos, I talk about this a lot in each video. Bear with me. It's for anybody that's new coming into this, so everybody gets a full breakdown and nobody is confused. Now, I use two analogies to explain this. And one is a rock in a pool, and the second is a rubber band. Now, you get a temporary wound cavity and a permanent wound cavity. Now, that temporary wound cavity is a quick displacement, and then it collapses back. That's what you see on ballistics gel. Now, what makes that possible is it being a water-based mammal. So elk, deer, etc. are water-based mammals, so there is an elasticity point. So when you impact it with a bullet at a high velocity, what's happening is it's causing a displacement. Now, if you're looking at the pool analogy, that's like taking a large rock, going up on the high dive of a pool, drop it in the water. What happens? It hits the water, there's a quick displacement, and then it collapses back. That water does back on the rock. That's essentially what's happening. So, with hydrostatic shock, which is under 2,200 feet per second, or over 2,200 feet per second without good performance, you're getting hydrostatic shock. Now, to use the rubber band analogy, that is where you're taking a rubber band, stretching it in all directions slowly until fibers start to break and it's structurally damaged. That's essentially what's happening. So when that temporary wound cavity goes through there, what's happening is it's causing stuff to rupture, bleed, bursting blood vessels and arteries. So it can cause a lot of damage. Now, what happens after that is it's going to collapse back and you're left with the permanent wound cavity. Now, with hydrostatic shock, what it's going to be is around the diameter of the projectile. So if you get 3/4 of an inch of expansion, it's going to be around 3/4 of an inch. If you only get a 1/4 inch of expansion, it's going to be around a 1/4 inch permanent wound cavity. Now, that can actually get larger if you achieve what's called hydraulic shock. Now, hydraulic shock is over 2,200 feet per second with proper bullet performance. Now, what's happening is that wound cavity is now becoming so large that it's expanding beyond the elasticity point of the media. So with that rubber band, you'd be taking that rubber band, stretching it until it explodes. Now, what you're going to see on an animal is massive, rapid expansion. It's going to be large, it's going to stretch beyond the elasticity point, and it's effectively going to turn the temporary wound cavity into the permanent wound cavity. And so in gelatin, what you're going to see is a wound cavity that's 2 to 3 times larger than the bullet itself. So obviously that's what you want. This is going to cause a complete evaporation of the organs like this, and that's just soup in there. I call it soup, puree. You can scoop it out. It's like mush. It'll go through your fingers. There's really nothing intact. You've basically exploded that entire chest cavity. Now, why, with the elasticity point and stretch, are animals like that susceptible to this shock? That's because not the entire part of the body is actually elastic. Now, the body has elasticity, being a water-based mammal. However, organs, the liver, the heart, the lungs are non-elastic. And so where the body will stretch, those organs won't. And so everything else is expanding out of the way, and those, when they expand, it's tearing, ripping, and exploding. So that's what gives you that good trauma. However, that's not true for everything in there. Now, if you go to the guts actually have elasticity. For a long time, animal guts were used to build bows, other kind of things. They are elastic, so they're not susceptible to the same type of damage. Now, the reason I bring this up is simply because any way you spin it, with a Texas heart shot, you are gut shotting an animal. Now, for those who don't know, here's my beautiful diagram. But a Texas heart shot is where the animal is facing directly away from you and you're shooting it straight up the butthole. Now that might sound funny, it's really not. And the reason why is because you are causing that animal to suffer. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if your bullet's impacting here, it's straight away, it's going through the guts. Now, as I've said, the guts are not susceptible to the same type of trauma. What happens when an animal's gut shot? It doesn't matter if it's a broadside shot and it's here, that animal is not going to bleed. There's not as much blood in there. So it's really a wounding shot. So it's going to cause that animal a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and it's going to be a slow, long death. So things are going to rupture. Now, something I've seen a lot of guys with gut shot animals, I've had to help them track them. We end up finding them somewhere between hours, even sometimes days. All this is toxic. It can spoil your meat. And so if you shoot it in the guts and it runs off and it takes a day to find it and it's been laying there dead for hours with that just going into the meat, it can completely ruin your animal. And the longer it takes, the worse it's going to get. So you have meat contamination. You have the animal is now suffering unnecessarily because you took a bad shot. That is, in any way you can try to spin it, is ultimately gut shotting the animal. Our responsibility as hunters is quick, ethical kills. We want as minimal suffering as possible. Now, if you look at this gel, what you're going to see, especially high velocity, the main part of that energy dump, that hydraulic shock or hydrostatic shock that's aiding you, is in the first portion of the gel block. Whether it's a longer gel block for a setup for an elk or a shorter one replicating what it does to a white-tailed deer, that trauma is being passed through this first part of it. That's where the main force of hitting is. Which, in this case, if you're shooting from the back to here, that's dumping it into the guts. So that elasticity is going to stretch. Now, is it still going to rupture stuff? Is hydraulic shock going to still damage it? Yes. However, it's not the same. You're not getting that massive blood loss. You're not destroying lungs. You are basically just rupturing the guts and making that animal suffer. It's a terrible shot. To continue with the problems of this, you also have the fact of less impact resistance. So the more resistance, the more that bullet is going to open up, causing a larger cavity. So if you're not hitting any resistance, if you miss the hip here and you just go through meat, which can very well happen, you're hitting a little bit of meat and then you're getting into here, and that's not going to aid your bullet at all in expansion. It's actually not going to crush through like it would a heart. It's actually going to pull those and end up tearing. Now, if you get lucky, you can get in the chest cavity. But again, by the time it's gone through here, all the way through these guts, it's slowed down and gets here into that chest cavity, it's lost a lot of its momentum, and you have to penetrate a great amount in order to get there. So best case scenario, it goes through here, in here, and causes a fatal death. Problem with that is, guess what? If it stops in here, the only hole is back here. So you're not going to have any real blood trail to follow. Guts don't have the same type of blood that the rest of the body does, so it doesn't bleed a lot. You might get a little bit from just the wound there, but you're not getting really anything to track it with. Now, it could exit out front and that would give you some, but again, you're not causing a whole lot of trauma. So again, you're really not getting any benefit out of this. If it does happen to exit the chest cavity, you'll have some blood. It'll give you a little better chance. But honestly, if you're blowing through that long of an animal, that bullet's not expanding. You're not getting good performance. You might as well be shooting it with a full metal jacket with a penetrator. So in most cases, what's going to happen is it's going to stop in here if it makes it to the chest cavity. Again, when a bullet's moving that slow, it's not causing a lot of trauma. And even if it gets in here, it's still going to be a slower, painful death for that animal. Now, a lot of cases, it's just going to stop in here. So I don't understand why people would do this. Quite honestly, it bothers me a lot just because I spend so much time and energy not only teaching people shot placement, bullets, etc., but as myself trying to get animals down as fast as possible. Now, something really dumb that some people have said about this is, oh, well, it works. You know, the animal eventually dies. Well, that's not really any justification. It's a very, very poor shot. No matter which way you spin it, it's bad. If you're lucky, if you get extremely lucky, you're going to end up with that animal going down relatively quickly and you can save the meat. But that is not very commonplace. So if people are out there, it blows my mind because I've had guys that are meat hunters try to claim, oh, well, you know, I'll take a Texas heart shot. And then they complain that, you know, I did a shoulder shot and they're like, oh, you damaged a little bit of meat. Okay. You potentially risked your entire deer's meat and took a bad shot. So, and a lot of the meat is on the rear legs. So if they hit that rear legs, they're damaging a big portion of their meat. So it's just altogether, it's a very, very poor shot. You need to be able to get that inside that chest cavity, the neck or the head. Those are how you're going to kill that animal rapidly, whether it's a CNS shot to the head, to the brainstem where it connects, shooting in the neck, again, severing that brainstem, a high shoulder shot to shut down the CNS, you know, heart, lungs. That is what's going to result in those quick, clean kills. Now, with angles, do you sometimes set it around the last rib or even just a little bit in the guts? Sure, I've seen that with, you know, arrows and stuff. Generally speaking, for myself, if it's quartering to where I have to put it behind the ribs and into the guts, I'm just going to pass. Or I'm going to move into a better position or wait for it to turn or whatever has to happen. But I'm not shooting it in the guts, even at an angling shot. If it's angling too much, I'm not taking the shot. I'm going to, at most, take it at the back of the ribs. So that back part of the vitals right here, because I don't want to rupture any guts. I don't want to potentially hit the guts, whether it's the temporary wound cavity or the bullet itself. That's just my personal view. People can do whatever they like. As far as I know, with archery, a lot of times guys will slip it behind the rib cage, right in the guts, and stick that arrow in. Arrows only kill by blood loss from cutting. So again, it's up to everybody else. I can kind of understand those quartering shots where they're putting it right behind, just in the last part. I can understand that a little bit, but doing a Texas heart shot where you're purposely shooting it through the entire guts and you're risking losing that animal and losing all that meat, I don't agree with. I don't like it. I don't understand people's logic behind that. Ultimately, though, how you conduct yourself in the field with your shots and bullet choice is up to you. I'm just here to show you stuff and advise to try to help people become better. So everybody be safe out there. Happy hunting.
Not that hard, people.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video. And happy hunting.